I'd like to speak about our relationship with Prabhupada, not only his direct disciples, but everyone's relationship with Prabhupada. If we study Prabhupada's mode of self-presentation, Prabhupada's self-understanding, and so on, it is clear that Prabhupada understood the role that Krishna had given him, first and foremost as being the founder, Acharya of ISKCON. There was a famous incident in 1970 when some disciples, sort of the unwitting instruments of some of Prabhupada's godbrothers, you can read about this in the Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is conspired, and a book was published in which Prabhupada's name on the cover of the book was A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. They'd removed Prabhupada and founder Acharya. The idea was that Bhakti Siddhanta was actually the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math. Prabhupada was simply a Gaudiya Math member, and therefore he had usurped some position. Anyway, it was a crazy thing, and the plot was, of course, the interesting point is Prabhupada discovered or understood fully this plot against him, specifically when he saw on the book that the publishers had removed the words founder Acharya and Prabhupada. Similarly, if we look at letters that Prabhupada wrote to important people, dignitaries, leaders of government, cultural leaders, he would often say, allow me to introduce myself, I am the founder Acharya of ISKCON. I'm the founder Acharya of ISKCON. So Prabhupada is my personal Diksha Guru. But I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find a letter from Prabhupada presenting himself to important people saying, allow me to introduce myself, I am the Diksha Guru of ISKCON. Rather, he said, I'm the founder Acharya. And as we know from chapter 6 of the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada translating Rupa Goswami says that the duty of a devotee is to follow the path of the great acharyas under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. So Prabhupada there in the Nectar of Devotion makes a distinction between a bona fide guru and the great acharyas. And Prabhupada identified first and foremost with his role as the founder acharya. In fact, if you take the trouble to, in the Veda base, which has been so kindly prepared for us by Prabhupada's followers, if you look at the Veda base, specifically the verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya himself, says, Jare dako tare koho Krishna upadesh. Whomever you meet, speak to them Krishna's teachings. Jare dako, whomever you meet, tare koho, tell them Krishna upadesh, Krishna's teachings. And amara gyai, by my order, Guru hoy, become a guru, and tare desh, save this land. Prabhupada, at least from what we have documented in the Veda base, Prabhupada quoted this verse approximately 200 times. Approximately 200 times. He cited this verse in morning classes, evening classes, morning walks, room conversations, press conferences, virtually in every type of venue, in every conceivable forum in which Prabhupada taught Krishna consciousness, he cited this verse. And if you study all approximately 200 citations, which I've done a few times, what you find is that Prabhupada, who was a brilliant teacher, always on message, as they say, there were a few very powerful, basic things that Prabhupada had to say about this verse. One of them was, as he said over and over and over again, it is not so difficult to become a guru. Prabhupada specifically realizing the highest esteem in which his disciples held him, Prabhupada was clearly concerned that his followers not be intimidated by that exalted position in the sense of thinking that I can't be a guru, because Prabhupada is a guru, and I'm obviously much less than Prabhupada, and therefore how can I be a guru? Prabhupada addressed this, what he perceived, I'm sure, as an issue, and said over and over and over again, do not think it is a very difficult thing. You simply have to repeat what Krishna said. Prabhupada, and now if you look at all the statements where Prabhupada talks about this, he does not make a distinction between Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru. In fact, the greatest guru of all gurus, who is Lord Chaitanya himself, who is Krishna himself, did not become a Diksha Guru, but in fact became a Shiksha Guru. So to say that a Shiksha Guru is inferior, which Shastra explicitly denies, would be absurd, since Mahaprabhu is a Shiksha Guru. Now, the one time that I remember Prabhupada making a distinction, he was in Nairobi. He was addressing a group of Hindu businessmen, and he told them that because you're, basically very entangled in business, and you have to do so many things that may not, let's say, at least superficially convey the dignity of the guru. Therefore, he said it may not be, you may not be ready immediately to become a Diksha Guru, but that doesn't matter. And it was not because, and it was simply because of the fact that they were immersed in business. And the Diksha Guru should have a certain type of lifestyle, you could say, to sort of the dignity of the office. The reason I'm mentioning this is because probably the most powerful thing that Prabhupada said over and over and over and over again in explaining this verse, again, hundreds of times, is that if you are sincere, you will become a guru. And that goes for everyone. It's not about ashram. It's not about gender. It's not about pecking order. So Prabhupada said, if you can save your family, save your family. Better if you can save your community, save your, your state or your province, save the country, save the world. Just do the best you can. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam that says that just as birds fly as high as they can in the sky, so a Vaishnava preacher glorifies the Lord to the full extent of his or her realization and ability. Prabhupada's concern, and you can find this being stated dozens and dozens and dozens of times in every conceivable venue and forum, was not that we would become gurus and compete with him. Prabhupada's concern was that we would not become gurus. That was his fear. Because to actually become a guru, again, this has nothing to do with male, female, ashram. It's simply about coming to the conclusion that I will not lead a selfish life. I will not lead a selfish life. I will live for Prabhupada. I will live for Krishna. Now, as I often say, this is one of my, this is my stump speech, one of my sound bites, that ISKCON inevitably has gone through its growing pains. Inevitably, because, that's life. And so history, as some great philosophers like Hegel and others, they talked about dialectical understanding of history, which simply means that there's a status quo, a thesis. Things are just going on in a certain way. And then there are opposing forces. And then gradually these two combine into a new thing. So very roughly, if we look at the history of ISKCON, the history of Prabhupada's mission, you could say the early stage was very enthusiastic and immature. And by immature, I mean things like perhaps not giving proper attention to our children, perhaps not giving proper attention to marriage relationships, to our own physical health, to our emotional health. And I mean this not as a criticism, because the devotees were, I think, extraordinarily sincere. They really were trying to their utmost to do the right thing to serve Prabhupada, but we were simply very young. And so then you get that extreme. We sort of went to extremes of self-sacrifice and self-denial, often sacrificing our physical and emotional health, as it turned out. And so one extreme produces an equal and opposite extreme, which was a type of mature unenthusiasm, where We went through a period where we were very mature, but to be too enthusiastic about preaching was sort of fanaticism, and you get this amazing phenomenon of devotee parents sort of like, fearing that their children may move into a Hare Krishna temple rather than going to college and so on. So you get this immature enthusiasm, a type of mature dullness. And as the dialectic moves on, we are ready to come to the next stage, the natural stage, which is mature enthusiasm. Mature enthusiasm, where we take care of ourselves, we keep ourselves healthy at every level. I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We keep ourselves healthy, and yet we are idealistic, we are enthusiastic, we give our lives to Prabhupada's mission. And so that's one thing. I wanted to say that, so what is your relationship with Prabhupada? The good news is that everyone has exactly the same equal access to Prabhupada in Prabhupada's most important role. Prabhupada's most important role, as he defined it, is he is the founder acharya. He is one of the great acharyas, as Prabhupada put it, who guides the entire course of Vedic civilization. So, Prabhupada is my Diksha Guru, and that's, of course, my great fortune. However, it would, if I said, or if someone believes that because Prabhupada is my Diksha Guru, therefore I have greater access to him than, let's say, one of my disciples, that would lead to an absurd conclusion. The absurd conclusion would be that if my disciple has less opportunity to develop a relationship with Prabhupada, less access to Prabhupada than I do, then it would follow that when I'm gone, then the generation following, the next generation, third generation, would be farther from Prabhupada, the next generation would be farther, so that as the decades and centuries pass, the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada's mission, would get farther and farther away from Prabhupada, and people would have less and less intimate a relationship with him, which is, of course, absurd. I think in many ways the opposite is true. In seeing the love that my disciples and other devotees in their generation, some people inconceivably have actually chosen other gurus. But anyway, but in the true Vaishnava spirit, I forgive them. So, Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish ki jai. Lord Jagannath, Lady Subhadra, Lord Balaram ki jai. Sri Sri Gaurnita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. To use, I would like to cite here a sort of like not a reversal inversion of one of Prabhupada's favorite analogies. And that is, Prabhupada used to describe the realization of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan by saying, if you're far away from a mountain, it appears like sort of like a cloud. In fact, you may not know if it's a mountain or a cloud. As you get closer, you see clearly it's a mountain. You see the contour and so on, a bit of the topography. When you're right on the mountain, you see all the details. This image actually can work also in another way. That when you're on the mountain, it may just look like a hill. And when you get a little farther away, you may detect that it's a mountain. When you get a mile or two away, you see that's a gigantic mountain. So I've seen in the love that my disciples have for Prabhupada, I sometimes think that because of their historical distance, which is of course material, because of their historical difference, in some ways I can learn from them about Prabhupada. So anyone who faithfully comes to Prabhupada, anyone who dedicates himself to Prabhupada has exactly the same opportunity to know Prabhupada, to love him. Prabhupada once wrote in a letter to a devotee in the temple where I joined in Berkeley that you are not seeing the real form of the Guru. You are seeing the external form. And he gave the example that the wind blows the clouds across the moon, and to us, it looks like the moon is flying through the clouds. So Prabhupada said, so the real form of Prabhupada, as an eternally liberated soul, as Krishna's most intimate representative, as the person that Gaur Nitai sent to save this planet, Prabhupada, in his actual spiritual form, someone may be my disciple or my grand disciple. I actually have grand disciples now. I know I look extremely young, but I have grand disciples. So, Krishna. Yes. Yeah. I'll just finish a few more points then. Is that okay? Okay. Anyway, so that's another point. That everyone has equal access to Prabhupada as Gaur Nitai's greatest emissary, as the founder Acharya, which was his real concern. Prabhupada talked even during his lifetime of having other disciples initiate. But the founder Acharya, no one else is the founder Acharya, and no one else is qualified to be the founder Acharya. And whatever generation you are, wherever you are on the ISKCON totem pole, if you are faithful to Prabhupada, you have the same opportunity as anyone else in any generation to know Prabhupada, to receive his mercy, and to receive his empowerment. Thank you. As Elvis used to say, you're a great audience. So, and so the essence of getting Prabhupada's mercy, he makes it very clear. Krishna makes it clear. At the end of the Gita, Jayidang Paramanguhyam, Mad Bhakte Shobi Dasyati. This is the future tense. One who will explain this supreme secret among the devoted. And there are many people who are not yet in ISKCON who are naturally devoted to God. There's a flash mob of the Hallelujah. They did a flash mob singing Hallelujah. And you see people deeply moved at this glorification of God. They may not have made the Govinda curve yet, but you can see their hearts are in the right place. They were practically moved to tears, and they were actually singing out that Lord of Lords, King of Kings, he shall reign forever and ever. That's devotion. These are not atheists. And so Krishna says, one who will teach this supreme knowledge among the devotees, or among the devoted, literally, was what it says, among the devoted, bhakti mai parang kritva, having rendered the highest devotional service. So it's like they always say, if everything else fails, read the instructions. And Krishna clearly says here that one who will explain this in the future, talking about us, having rendered the highest devotional service, Mam eva aishati nasangshaya, without doubt will come to me alone. You won't go anywhere else but to Krishna. And then Krishna says, Nacha tasman manusheshu kaschin me priya kritama, which very literally means no one else but this person is most dear to me. No one but this person is most dear to me. Nacha tasman manusheshu kaschin me priya bhavitana chame bhuyo anyat priyataro bhuvi. And no one will ever be more dear to me in this world than that person. Prabhupada as the transparent via media, Prabhupada as the only absolutely pure soul. I mean, his guru also, of course, but in the contemporary scene, Prabhupada as the pure devotee. There's a range of meanings. Prabhupada, if you actually look at his teaching seriously, he gives high and low definitions of things. For example, there's a high and low definition of illicit sex. If you actually read what Prabhupada writes and go past the sort of the urban legends, a lot of the time, Prabhupada, of course, says that illicit sex means sex not for procreation. But there's a whole series of quotes. I compiled them, and obviously not for selfish purposes because I'm a sannyasi. But there is a series of quotes where Prabhupada clearly says illicit sex means sex outside of marriage. So there is a high and a low definition. There are quotes about guru where you've got, and there's a high and low definition of guru. of Uttamadikar, of all these different things. So, but Prabhupada, in the high definition, in the highest sense of the word, is a pure devotee. Prabhupada told Professor Stoll, all my disciples are pure devotees. We kind of just slide in under the wire there. But in the highest sense of pure devotee, it's Prabhupada. And Krishna says this is the highest service. Prabhupada embodies, personifies, reveals Krishna's dramatic climax in the Gita. The highest service, if you really want to surrender to Krishna, if you want to be dear to Krishna, if you want to be noticed by Krishna and his pure devotee Prabhupada, then you have to teach Krishna consciousness. You can do it in your own way. Everyone has their limitations. Everyone has their special abilities. Everyone has their unique, as we say, human condition. Whether it's financial, social, psychological, cultural, whatever. We're all unique. We all have our unique challenges. But everyone has to find the best possible way that he or she can take up this spirit and spread this movement. That's Prabhupada. And the last point I want to make is I personally never saw Prabhupada in my life when he was not trying to spread Krishna consciousness. He could be doing anything. He could be relaxing. And if you look at his life, it's so dynamic. There is no time. Since the moment Prabhupada met his guru and began to manifest his pastimes as a pure devotee, he was always very dynamically pushing forward. There was a time when he wanted to make a lot of money to finance wide preaching of his guru's movement. And he was tirelessly traveling all over India, tirelessly. He wasn't just an ordinary person, grihastha, doing business. He was inspired, he was tireless. And then when Krishna showed him that's not the way for you now, then he was tirelessly, writing back to Godhead, books. He practically had heat stroke in Delhi, going out and, in horrible temperatures, door to door, not being acknowledged or respected. He never stopped. He never stopped pushing. His life is continuous endeavor, continuous exertion, continuous dynamic energy. And then, of course, finally, Krishna revealed his real position. My last point here is that there cannot be a movement made up of people who are not individually moving. Each one of us has to be internally, in our own life, sort of a microcosmic Hare Krishna movement. We actually have to be advancing. Today, we should somehow or other try to chant our japa, that old nemesis of the modern practitioner. Every day we should try to do kirtan or japa in such a way that we advance, that we are moving, that my spiritual understanding today is not the same as it was yesterday or the day before, that I am personally moving. I am moving toward Krishna. And as Prabhupada said, for every step I take toward Krishna, he's taking several steps toward us. So when you get a group of people who individually are advancing, are realizing Krishna more and more, are feeling greater and greater enthusiasm, you put them all together, you get an unstoppable, irresistible force, which is the real Prabhupada Hare Krishna movement. Right here in Los Angeles, there's so many things Prabhupada said in Los Angeles to me. Once he gave a class, of course, to everybody, and he was joking, sort of, as I say, the truth is often told in jest, because he knew that many of his disciples were very enthusiastically selling the books and not reading them. So Prabhupada said in the temple room, actually the old temple room, he was giving class and he said, so when you're selling books, if someone says to you, do you read these books? You say, no, sir, I personally don't read them, but you should read it. So when we approach someone and ask them, chant Hare Krishna, read this book, visit our temple, what are we asking them to do? What we're telling them is, your life, as it is now, is not good enough. I mean, in a nice way, hopefully. But we're saying, and of course, we don't use the K word. Karma. So, but we are telling people, wherever you are at now, wherever your life is now, You have to move forward. Are we doing that? Are we simply, let's say, in a holding pattern in our spiritual life? Did we sort of plateau, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm not really falling down seriously, and I may not be conquering the world, but life is good, and past the pakoras. So, if I, in my life, if I have the courage, and it's something, of course, I'm not saying I do, but if I can find the courage within myself, the determination, wherever I'm at right now, to make further advancement, to further surrender my vanity and pride, and to work a little harder for Prabhupada, by doing that, I gain the moral right or the spiritual right to ask other people to do it. I'm not a hypocrite. Because I can't really ask someone to do something that I'm not doing. So the more I am advancing and making sacrifice for Prabhupada in a mature, healthy, emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually healthy way, I'll end in a second, the more I'm empowered to ask others. So I have to be moving in order to push a movement. I have to be offering myself to Krishna to ask other people to do that. As Prabhupada said, if you approach the sun, you have to become fire. That means that as we start to approach Krishna, some of our false ego starts to burn off. We may think, that doesn't feel good. So that's, I think, the vow, or that's the dedication we should somehow find within ourselves today. And I'll end with this, that number one, every one of us has the same equal access to an intimate, powerful relationship with Prabhupada. What you have to do is simply to observe the etiquette. For example, if you're a wife, you try to honor your husband. If you're a husband, you try to honor your wife. If you're children, you honor your parents. Parents try to take care of their children. One tries to respect those who have taught you Krishna consciousness. If someone, as Prabhupada's representative, has helped you, you honor those people. So every one of us, by doing our own, and this is Krishna, I'm really going to stop here, but just the verse Krishna says in the Gita, touching exactly on this point, how everyone is equal, each in their own duty. Krishna says, sway, sway, karmani abhidata. Each one devoted to their own duty. Sway, sway, each to their own duty. This is in the 18th chapter of the Gita. Sway, sway, karmani abhidata. Sangsid hing labatedra. A person achieves perfection. So everyone has the same opportunity, exactly the same opportunity, to know Prabhupada, to love him, to receive his empowerment, if you do your duty. Our duties are different, but the result is the same for everyone. What did Prabhupada want us to do? What Krishna describes at the end of the Gita as the highest devotional service, and that is to teach this knowledge. And how can we teach this knowledge? If we are practicing. If we are surrendering to Prabhupada and Krishna, if we are taking Prabhupada's desires above our own, that's your choice, your choice. We have only two choices. Number one, I can put Prabhupada's desires in the center of my life, or number two, I can be a complete nutcase thinking about my own desires. She loves me not. He loves me not. I like this, I don't like that. You can literally drive yourself loopy with your own desires, or you can stop all the nonsense, cut the insanity, and just put Prabhupada's desires in the center of your life. And when you do that, Prabhupada will empower you to convince others to do that. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.